On today's episode,
the starting point is never talking about the money. It's about understanding what really matters to you. I'm so busy working, I don't see my wife, I don't see my children, I'm never at home, and when I am at home, I'm not present. And over that 20-year period, my father lost nearly all of his wealth. He needed emotional and financial care from me. Did he drink because of poor decision making? I 100% believe that our approach changes people's lives.
So Dominic, welcome to the Chester Centurion Podcast.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. Before we get started today, I'd love to know more about the business. Tell us a bit about Xentum and what you do.
Okay, so Xentum has kind of transformed over the 21 years we've had the business. And I would say that now we are an organization that educates and empowers our clients to consistently make good personal financial decisions. The audience that we seem to serve now are high performing athletes. So we have a sports division looking after high performing athletes. And then we also look after business owners who are looking to transition from business owner to whatever the next chapter looks like.
Interesting. Tell us a little bit more about each of them. What do you mean by high-performing athletes?
So the high-performing athletes at the moment are primarily Premier League football players. So we are working with the likes of Brian Robson, Chris Smalling, board at Manchester United, and some of the other clubs. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to educate and empower the players so that they make some really good decisions. High performing athlete, your career potentially is relatively short. Mm-hmm. So your earning capacity maybe is only 7 to 10 years. And during those 7 to 10 years, you need to consistently make really good decisions so that you set yourself up for life.
Interesting.
And because we have worked with some of these players in the past, because of our methodology of planning is everything, it's not about transactions, it's about creating a vision, it's about creating a plan, and then it's about having processes to stick to that plan. The high-performing athletes understand that because it's all about a process and the outcome takes care of itself.
I guess some of these customers that you're working with are quite young as well, Dominic, are they?
Yep. Yeah, I mean, again, in the sports world, they are. So again, they will be, coming to us at 19 or so, and sometimes their careers will be finishing in their late 20s or in their 30s, but then they still have the second half or another 2/3 of life after that. So we want to make sure they've got a fantastic foundation.
That's so cool.
So with the sports people, that's what we do. But then in some ways with the business owners, they're a little bit further down the journey of life.
A little bit more water under the bridge, yeah?
Yeah.
A bit like myself.
Yeah, and myself. Yeah, I mean, I think the majority of business owners we're working with tend to have been in business for, maybe 10, 15, some of them are 20, 25 years. And they are just kind of wondering what the transition is. How to transition from that. I had a really interesting meeting the other day with a gentleman, and he was only in his early 40s, but the biggest concern he had was that time was slipping by. It was, am I making good decisions? I'm conscious that time is going by, and I want to make sure I get the most out of life. And he actually had quite a lot of anxiety about it. And so a piece of work that I'm going to do with him will be trying to help him have better well-being around that, about his decision making as to what he spends his time doing.
What do you mean by good decisions?
So I think that the first thing that we all need to do, and we all get off track. I've been off track so many times in my life. It's about understanding what really matters to you. So I think that the starting point with any of the clients that we work with is to try to get them to articulate to us what are the most important things in your life. And to give you an example, so this has got nothing to do with money. So this was where you and I had that conversation, that even though we run a firm that has a very high knowledge and understanding of personal financial planning, the starting point is never talking about the money. It's actually having a conversation where you create the environment where you can have a really honest conversation with that person, and they can have an honest conversation with themselves as to what really matters. And to give you an example of what matters to nearly every one of our clients would be family. And so if I look back over my career, there will be times when I have conducted myself in a way that was contradictory to taking care of my family. So, I maybe was never around, or, a lot of business owners I've worked with, they talk about, well, I'm so busy working, I don't see my wife, I don't see my children, I'm never at home. And when I am at home, I'm not present. Well, that contradicts what actually matters most to most of our clients. So we go through the process of trying to understand, well, can you give us potentially 6 or 8 areas of life that are the most important areas of your life?
And I get that. And you're creating that environment for people to relax, open up, really think on a much deeper level than probably they've ever thought before about what's important. How do you create that environment?
Yes, it's a great observation, good question. And what you have to do is you have to create an environment of trust and vulnerability. So you have to come into that room with no ulterior motive other than a very honest conversation between 2 or 3 human beings, with no desire to get a specific outcome other than to create a space where everybody knows that we all care about each other, and it is totally okay to be vulnerable, because every one of us in life are vulnerable. So it's actually being willing to be vulnerable. It's willing to be honest with yourself, and willing to kind of say, let's just have a very honest conversation about what matters and why. And when you do that, the conversation is just so powerful. It's so rewarding for everybody in that room. And you then start to get a little bit of an idea as to the direction of travel that we all should be looking at to help each other go.
Wow. Trust and vulnerability. I've written that down, Dominic. They're powerful, powerful words. And, I do touch on this during my coaching sessions as well. And you get that environment right, and you're right, the conversations take on a whole new meaning.
Yeah, totally.
So you're looking for...
With trust, it's kind of like human beings are incredibly, incredibly intelligent and can work out when somebody has an ulterior motive.
Yeah, so it's emotional intelligence, isn't it?
It is. And so therefore, by inviting somebody, and a lot of times we'll invite them here to our home, or I'll meet them at a place where they feel, and I feel, that they can be at ease. Sometimes that's in nature. So I've had meetings where I've gone for a 5-6 mile walk with somebody. Sometimes I will invite them to come here because it's a very relaxed and calming environment. Ideally, I don't want to meet people in their workplace, or I don't want to meet them sometimes not even always at their home for their first time, because I want to create an environment where they can relax. Because the other thing that's really important when you do this type of work is to get the best results. You want to have a quiet mind.
Yeah.
And this all might sound a little bit crazy to some of your listeners, because they're thinking, well, what's this got to do with financial planning and making great decisions?
You've stolen my next question, Dominic. You've stolen my next question. I've got it written down here. But before we go there, I want to make the connection. I do want to make the connection. But before we go there, I'd like to know a little bit more about the 6 to 8 areas. Why 6 to 8, and how what kind of process do you go through to get people thinking on a deeper level and understanding what they care about? Is there a process that you walk through or go through?
There is a little bit of a process, and just to try and give your listeners a little bit of an idea of what we try and do here is that, and this whole process can take a couple of hours. So I'm going to try and share. I'm going to try and share with you in a couple of minutes a process that takes a couple of hours. And if any of your listeners are kind of thinking, okay, well, how do they go about it? Is imagine your happy place. Imagine somewhere that you would go that just brings you a really lovely feeling of joy and contentment and peace and happiness and what have you. So for me, very easily, I could go to the Lake District. I'm a farmer's son from the lakes. So I could go up into the hills, and I could just find a spot in the hills, and I could just sit down overlooking some beautiful view of the Lake District. And when I'm in that place and I'm just relaxed, no phones, no distractions, nothing else, have a moment of reflection as to what you are grateful for. And if you then start to think what you're grateful for, the answers of what matters to you in life will start to come to you. And I try not to give anybody the answers, because I don't want them to have mine. I want them to have their own unique answers.
Very true.
But if you go and just reflect on your life, or you reflect as to the joy you've had maybe over the last 6 or 12 months, and why you have been so grateful, or why you have joy and appreciation, the answers will start to come. And then when the answers start to come, you will write down your first 8, which they could be. Now, if you then have a conversation with somebody like myself, you ideally need somebody who is not emotionally attached, who's not in your show, and who is willing to challenge you on your 8. Mm-hmm. Because in most cases, when people give me their 8 areas that are most important to them, over a conversation, some of those 8 drop out, and actually they are replaced with other things. And then what we get is we start to get 6 to 8 areas of their life which really mean something to them, and something that is really valuable, important.
So we'll go on to the next question then, Dominic, is how does this tie back into financial planning?
Okay. So once we know what matters to you, it's kind of like if I maybe flip it the other way. If I have no idea as to what matters to you and why, and what matters to you and your family and why, how can I be a good guide to you?
Well, you can't.
I can't. I could come along and one of my team could come to talk to you about pensions or inheritance tax or whatever it might be. However, if one of the things that matters to you the most is that when your journey is over, you're going to give all your money to charity, well, why are we even talking about inheritance tax? Because you don't have an inheritance tax bill. You have to understand what matters to that family and why before you can help them make a decision. And then what happens is that when you're making a decision, whatever financial decision you're making, you run it via the 8 most important things, or the 6. It doesn't have to be 8. It's just 8. 8 just happens to work quite well in the process that we take you through. So as an example, it might be even, I buy another company. Do I sell my business? Do I go and take a new role? Well, in all of those questions, run the consequences of that decision through the 8 most important things that matter to you in life, and see whether the consequences of that decision are going to enhance the majority of all of the things that matter.
Wow.
And if they don't, maybe reconsider your decision.
One of the 7 habits in Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is start with the end in mind.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of we're so busy, and I in some ways all of this has been learnt from the mistakes and errors that I've made over the last 40 or so years, and learning from clients who've done incredibly well and had a really fulfilled and happy life, and clients with lots of wealth who haven't. But it's kind of going back to the basics. It's going back, and instead of just always focusing on how do I make my business worth more, how do I make more money, how do I not pay tax, how do I do this, how do I do the other, is to take a step back and say, our journey as a human being is a relatively short period of time. What really matters to me and why, and what do I want my legacy, or what do I want that journey to look like? And if you then realize, okay, so, and just to go back a little bit on this, Alan, if I can, because this hopefully helps your listeners. But as I mentioned, I've given one of the 8 away. So one of the 8 away for nearly all of our clients is the value and the importance of family. But then what we also say to people when they've given us the 8 is, on a score out of 10, give yourself a score out of 10 for family. So if at the moment everything is amazing, it couldn't be better, the whole dynamics of the family, everything you're doing and everything else, you could give yourself a 9 or a 10. But if there are things that are maybe not quite where you'd want them to be, you maybe would give yourself a 4, 5, 6 or 7. And therefore, if we have that for 8 areas of our family, of the clients we serve, and we have a scoring and everything else, we then are able to say, okay, great. Well, we now need to make a decision. This decision, these are the consequences of the decision. And do those consequences enhance any of those 8? And over the years, we've worked with hundreds and hundreds of business owners. And when you create an environment where they feel safe, willing to be vulnerable, and they trust the conversation, you will be amazed how many business owners turn around and give you scores of 3 and 4 across nearly the whole board.
Well, I'm thinking in my head about that first question.
Yeah.
Totally. It's not a high score.
No,
it's not a high score.
No, and we're all kind of not programmed, but we all have this facade in business. We have this facade in business. You know, I'm a CEO of a company, or the business is successful, or you're driving forwards, or what have you. So in some ways, you know, you don't visibly want to show vulnerability. You don't sometimes maybe want to be honest with yourself as to, do you know what? My score for family is a 4 because I'm always busy. I'm never at home. I don't have a good relationship with this person in my family or that person in my family. And it's only when somebody comes in and points that out and they have that conversation, but from a place of love and care, that you can start to actually change either your behaviors or change your decision making, so that the scoring for family maybe goes from a 5 to a 6 or a 6 to a 7. And again, we're not looking to take it from a 5 to a 10 because that's unrealistic. In every one, we're just saying, okay, well, we want things to move from a 4, 5 or a 6 to a 7. And we understand that every decision is not going to move everything. But if the decision is going to have a negative impact on too many things, we should reconsider it.
So your business model is quite clearly not a traditional finance advice type business model that we're used to. And I've been privileged enough to watch you speak, Dominic, and I remember going, I've never heard a financial planner talk like this before. This is incredible. And, you know, the one thing that came to mind is no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care was one of the phrases that came into my mind when I watched you speak. And I think, I might be wrong here, so please, if I am wrong, challenge me. But I think you could probably make more money in a traditional way of approaching the market. So my question to you is, why are you doing it this way? Why does it matter?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Okay, so let me just share with you. So the basics is that commercially, you're 100% right, is that if we go down the traditional route of just advising clients, and fundamentally the traditional route is you advise clients and you take a percentage of their success as part of your remuneration for doing the piece of work. However, in my experience, as I've kind of come to kind of mature and understand the markets and everything else, for me, that is conflicted because you are incentivized maybe to go down a certain route. And this is a really personal one for me because it takes me back to when my father was in his late 20s and I was a young boy. And my dad was a really lovely human being, really generous, really kind and everything else. He was an only child, inherited a load of money in his late 20s, I think it was early 30s. And over a 20-year period, he had people coming through his door who were motivated to sell products rather than motivated to help him make fantastic decisions. And over that 20-year period, my father lost nearly all of his wealth. He needed the family to house him. He needed emotional and financial care from me. Then, there was issues then around, did he drink because of poor decision making? Did his health deteriorate because of those consequences? And ultimately, my father ended up getting pancreatic cancer, and I cared for him until he passed about 14 years ago now. And when I looked at all the paperwork, I just thought, wow, there was such a better way to care for somebody than that.
Gosh.
And so we decided quite a number of years ago now that we would change our business model, and our business model would be based purely on time and complexity.
Mm-hmm.
And to give you an example, because in some ways this is where the idea came from, and it's a little bit like being a fantastic mountain guide. As you know, I'm from the lakes, but I also used to enjoy climbing in Switzerland, and I used to go to Zermatt and climb. And if you go over there and you go climbing and you turn up at the guide's hut and say, I'm here for 2 weeks and I want to climb, they tell you to go and sit in a coffee shop, and a guide appears at the coffee shop. Over that 30-40-minute coffee, the guide is wanting to understand why you're there for 2 weeks, what an amazing couple of weeks looks like, why you want to climb the ridges, or why you want waterfalls, or why you want to do anything. He's also trying to understand, or she's trying to understand, what your values are. So they're watching your behaviors, they're watching how you treat the waitress and everything else, because they have to trust you with their life when they're in the mountains as you do with theirs. And then at the end of that whole process, once you have actually articulated what you really want to have as an amazing couple of weeks, they then turn around and go, great, I'm going to need 1 or 2 people. It's going to take this amount of time, and this is the cost. So it's beautifully clear. It's beautifully transparent. They've identified what matters to you and why for the time you're there. They've worked out what your values are, because they have to trust you with their life. And then they've given you a quote as to their time and complexity. And in some ways, that is exactly how we do it at Xentum, is that at Xentum, we turn around and we are very, very good academically at understanding how to help people make great decisions with their finances. But we don't understand why we should get paid a proportion of our clients' success.
So would you regard yourself as a disruptor?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, again, we are in the 0.3% of our sector. That if you are chartered, if you are independent, and if you are truly fixed fee, it is less than 1% of the sector.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. But the difference for me in that, if you're able to go in with that approach, any of our team can sit in a room, and the client is never thinking, what product is coming? What product are you going to recommend? How are you manipulating the conversation? How is things happening? Because we're sat in that room, and whether the client does anything or does nothing, invests £10 or £10 million, they are paying for our time and paying for our expertise. And once clients are clear in that, they straight away, the level of trust, I think, goes up. The level of willingness to be vulnerable, because they know that we're not going to at any point take any advantage of that vulnerability. The ability to offer absolute pure guidance, I think, feels right to me now. Again, I've been doing this for 30 years. The first 10 or 15, I was on the other side, but actually I had my kind of Jerry Maguire moment, and then because of the experience of my father, that has driven me to create a different type of business. Because if the other type of business had been created and somebody had actually sat with my father when he was 27 and asked him the consequences of his decision making and whether they aligned with his priorities and values, his whole journey of life could have been very different.
Wow. Dominic, what next? Where are you going with this?
So for me, I'm a year away from 60. I have promised my family that I would start to take it a little easier over the next 5 or so years. So the aim for me is to lay down the foundations for the next generation. So I want to lay down the foundations for the next generation of planners at Xentum. And what we also hope, if I'm looking at what the big dream would be, is, can we be a big enough disruptor that the whole industry changes from a transactional sales industry to one of being an absolute mentor, coach, guide to families to help them make great decisions.
Is that your mission?
I think it's, again, what I don't want to do is, that would be a fantastic legacy. I hold back a little bit on a mission because I'm not, the outcome will be the outcome. What I've learned over the years is believe in your processes, get your processes fantastic, deliver your processes day in, day out, communicate a message that actually is very logical and has a huge impact on people's lives. And whether the whole industry changes or not is out of my control, but hopefully enough people will see the value in our approach.
Gosh. Dominic, I've got one more question for you, but I just wanted to kind of say what an inspiration it is to listen to you talk and have that fresh, brand new approach to, caring for the outcome that people expect from life. And it's just wonderful. It's really refreshing to hear. And yeah, I enjoy talking to you. Every time we talk, I do enjoy talking to you. So thank you for that. But my last question is the big one. What are your top 3 pieces of advice that you could offer someone who's thinking about starting their own business? What would be your top 3?
You have to totally believe in what it is that you're doing. For Xentum, I've done this for 30 years. I am still as passionate, if not more passionate now. And that is because I 100% believe that our approach changes people's lives. So that is what my purpose is. That's what gives me joy. That's what fulfills me, gives me so much meaning. And I think doing a job that doesn't have meaning or purpose would be soul destroying. So that is the most important. I think the second lesson that I have learnt is either get other people around you who are brilliant, or find yourself a coach who is brilliant, because they will challenge your perspective and they will help you to make better decisions and to waste less time and to move faster.
Obviously like that one as well.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And the third one?
And the third one, which again, I've only really valued in probably the last 5 to 6 years, creating a culture, a brilliant culture, is so incredibly rewarding. That if you create a culture where people know that you care about them and the business cares about the clients, it is just so uplifting to be around people in your business when the culture is right. Yeah. And I think, it all comes, you probably saw there when you asked me why we set the business up, it took me back to, my father. And in some ways for me, it's very personal, because create something there that would have taken amazing care of my family. And that is the filter we use now in our business. Every decision we make has to be for people that we have unconditional love for. And we make those decisions and then we say, brilliant, that is how we're going to look after all of the clients that we serve. Okay, brilliant. Thanks, Ellen. All the best. Take care.